This week on Breaking Bullying, we're talking co-parenting and boundaries. So I'm going to hit that music and get started. Joining me this week is a co-parenting coach, JP Marsh. JP, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
So, JP, how'd you get started into becoming a co-parenting coach?
I guess from a young age, like my dad quit drinking when I was young, like 5 years old or something like that, and needed AA. We spent a lot of time going to the AA meetings with him, doing the family AA stuff. I mean, it was a community of people, and in the AA realm, you had sponsors. So my dad had sponsors, and then became a sponsor, and that tracked, most of my life. And then as I got into my, early mid 30s, when I started doing work on myself and sort of getting into that realm, then it sort of, you know, to collapse time, do some of these things, it was easier to have mentors.
In what ways can children internalize the negative aspects of a dysfunctional co-parenting relationship?
I mean, there's the obvious ones. If you got a really high conflict co-parenting relationship, and say like you do drop off and pickups at McDonald's parking lot, and you got one or the other absolutely losing their mind every time,
Yeah.
right? Which happens. I mean,
Yep.
it happens a lot. You know what I mean? You go into the store and you see two people just having a screaming match in the parking lot while the kids are sitting in the car. You're showing them that that's how society works, right?
Yep.
I mean, you're seeing it in our culture right now with like some of these protests. I'm not going to say like this isolated one because it's a bunch of different ones. But you see these people absolutely freak out, screaming in the face of somebody who disagrees with them, right?
Yep.
Because they've been taught that that is acceptable behavior in our society. And so if you're doing that in front of your kids, if you're losing your mind at your kids' dad and you decide it's acceptable behavior to start slapping at him, right? When all he's trying to do is just get in the car and drive off with your kids, right? Be surprised when your daughter does that at school
Yeah.
to some other girl or some little boy who has a disagreement or a different point of view because they learn that is acceptable behavior. And then when they get in trouble for that at school, but you're not getting in trouble for that outside, then it becomes this huge confusion of why is it acceptable for you, but not me, right?
Yeah. And the sad part is that parent was probably treated the same way as a kid. How do we
Right.
break that cycle?
It,
Because you have a tough job. You have to coach parents on how to parent, and people don't want to be taught how to parent
right.
their kids. That's like an insult. So, you know, how yeah, how do we break it?
A lot of it is people aren't going to reach out to me for help unless they know deep down they need help. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Somebody who's like concretely stuck in their ways is probably not going to reach out to somebody for a different point of view. Now, holding people accountable is a lot more of what I do as opposed to, this, that, and those. I mean, sure, there's a whole slew of tricks and different ways of thinking about things that I'll bring up, but I'm not your cheerleader. You know what I mean? I'm not the same
Yeah.
people that you're not working with me to have another yes man that's going to concrete the BS stuff that you're doing that is detrimental to your happiness and your child's life. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like you have all your friends and your family to sit around and help you bash your ex. I'm not that person. Like if you're out of control or if you're in the wrong, like I'll call you on it because that's just how it is. You know what I mean? But like they are mostly generational curses. And until somebody can actually look in the mirror and say, you know what, I'm not as perfect as I think I have been told or have convinced myself, it all starts with you. You know what I mean? In my co-parenting journey, you know, I probably made every mistake that you could make as two people trying to figure out how to get on the same page, be on the same level, work together. You know, luckily we both had the mindset of we put our daughter first.
Yeah.
That made it easy. But once I stopped being super defensive for no reason, be the change you want to see. You know what I mean? Because it all starts with you.
How did you recognize that you had to change? Like, okay, I made a mistake. How do you recognize that? Is it seeing your kid cry? Is it like something had to tell you like this was a bad idea, or this is not the right way to handle this?
I had to be able to share blame and not just put everything on my ex, saying, you know, you're the reason. This is why you're provoking me. You're doing it on purpose because you know that I'll, you know. But once I quit reacting to certain things, the buttons quit getting pushed because she wasn't getting the reaction that she may have wanted. But also, like I had to understand that I was being defensive for no reason or overreacting.
My biggest question is, what was like the moment that you're like, I have to change? Like, what happened? Are you able to share that?
My daughter turned 2, and me and her mother had split up. So I moved out, moved in with my folks. You know, starting over from scratch, all that stuff. So I'm sitting there, and I'm a single father, which is brand new, at my folks' place. 3 weeks after I'd gotten there, my dad died unexpectedly. So then,
Oh,
like, on top of my relationship falling apart, my new reality as a single father, now my dad dies, but I'm stuck in the house with my mom trying to deal with me grieving my father and my failed relationship while being supportive to a 2-year-old toddler, but also not being able to escape my mom's grief. You know what I mean? So like I
yeah,
couldn't like it wasn't like my brother where I could go there and kind of help out and be around my mom in the grieving process and go home. And you know what I mean? And
yeah,
escape. Like there just wasn't really much of an escape for me. And there was a lot of back and forth with my daughter's mom. And I remember it was a Saturday. I had my daughter. I'm on the phone with her mom, and we're fighting like crazy. And I'm outside, you know, trying to like at least be a little bit responsible and not be like in a yelling match with my ex in front of my daughter. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And so I was out back, and I'm fighting with her mom, and I look over, and my daughter's like 4 years old, just bawling. And I was like, man, I gotta sort this shit out. Like this is not the kind of environment that I want to raise my daughter in. Like this is not acceptable behavior on anybody's side or any way, shape, or form. Like this is not healthy. This is not going to be good. You know what I mean? And so
yeah,
then it became a that really kicked off a lot of mental health books, a lot of therapy books, a lot of brain hacking books, a lot of, you know, change the way you think, change your reality type of books. And as I got farther and a little bit more and a little bit more in the journey as far as working on myself and sort of figuring out what was triggering me, and you know, the majority of it didn't really even have anything to do with my ex. You
yeah,
know, it was mostly stuff that I'd been shoving down since I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, you know, that we're all
yeah,
just being lit up to the future or being lit up at those moments because all of a sudden I got a emotion or a feeling that I don't know how to deal with. And so my first instinct is to lash out because you're making me feel this way. But that was really the moment. Like I'm sitting there, and you got a 4-year-old just bawling because she knows that her parents are
yeah.
sitting there screaming at each
And
other
and she's
again.
scared.
And it's just like, this is not, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, terrified. And I'm just like, this is not how I want my daughter to grow up. You know what I mean?
yeah. What's your advice to parents? Because parenting is tough. Co-parenting, parents together, it's tough. You're in the car, for instance, and you get ticked off and you start having a shouting match at anybody. And you slipped up, you did it in
Right.
front of your kids. how can you tell a kid what daddy just did was not nice? Like, what's your
Right.
advice when you have slip ups?
Don't beat yourself up. Essentially, we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we have. The tools that you have were taught to you or learned, whether it be from your parents, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, your brothers, your sisters, people at school, now TV, internet, you have an accumulation of all of these things. You're going to slip up. I mean, ideally, most people are trying to add more tools to their toolbox and be better people. You know what I mean? But kids are a lot more intuitive and a lot smarter than people want to give them credit for it. If I'm driving and I blurt out at somebody who cut me off and my daughter's in the back seat, you know, it's telling her that I made a mistake. It's not acceptable behavior. She understands that.
Parents need to decide how they want their kids to be when they grow up. Kids are visual learners, visual and kinesthetic learners. So what they see is how they're gonna react. So do you want to have your kids own up to mistake or learn how to talk to somebody who may have did them wrong? Or do you want your kid to be yelling, screaming, and shouting because someone made a simple mistake? Parents need to decide for themselves
Right.
which one of those do I want my kids to be? And I don't think as sometimes as parents as we realize the impact we have on our kids when we do go off the handles, we go crazy because I'm not perfect. I lose my temper in front of my kids too. I have to tell my kids I'm sorry. I can't remember I can't remember the last time
Right.
I did it, but I know I've done it at some point. It's good when kids can if you can tell your kids, "Hey, what I did was a mistake. I'm sorry. Don't do that." That's going to teach them.
Right.
This is how we handle these situations. It's okay to be upset and angry. I still feel like if you're upset and angry, it's okay to show those emotions. Show it, but also show a better way to handle those emotions. You can be visibly upset,
Right.
be angry, talk loud, but don't go hit a wall. Don't don't try to go hurt
Right.
somebody else just because you're hurt.
Right.
If your daughter does something, you give her a consequence. Does that carry on over your exes as well? Like if you
Yeah.
said no TV for 3 months, is that the same standard
No TV
with your
there or
exes?
here.
That's a
Mhm.
standard, correct? Yeah, because
Right.
I think a lot of
And so,
issues
like,
are is we have
yeah,
you have standards at your place, but then at the mom's place or the
yeah,
dad's
right,
place,
right,
whatever, not the same.
right. And how does any rational and critical thinking adult think that is going to generate a healthy mentality for a child? Like, oh, I have to go to my dad's where he's got all these rules. Next week, I get to go to my mom's where she's gone half of the time doing whatever she wants to, or vice versa. I'm not saying it's, always one way or the other, but like, well, no wonder have rules and they could do whatever they want. And they basically ran the house when they were 8 years old. Well, no wonder they spend all their time there when they're in high school because they're not being challenged on what is acceptable behavior and, going to school or being accountable or being on time. You know what I mean? They're going to choose the fun parent
Correct.
or the
And the
non
problem
existent
is
parent.
they're losing routine, and kids need
Right,
routine. You break that routine, that's when they act up. I run a martial arts school,
right,
and when kids come back, we just got done from winter break, and these kids are like, they have to come back to learn again. They had 2 weeks of doing nothing. They're a little
hmm,
rambunctious, but when they
right.
get back into routine again in a couple days, they're back to their normal selves. I couldn't imagine having a kid going from one routine to another routine, what that behavior looks like on a daily basis. And people might
It
think, what does this
gets
have to do with bullying? It does a lot with bullying because your kid doesn't
right,
your kid doesn't know how to act. He sees one way, one parent
right,
acting one way, the other parent acts the one way. So which way is appropriate? almost,
Right.
you know, it's easier to be a prick, to be honest with you. It's easier to be a prick.
Right. It
It's
is.
hard to be responsible and own up because when you have to be responsible, you have to admit, take some shame, some guilt with that. You have to take that on yourself, and that's hard to
Right.
do for people.
Right. Well, and then with and it's, with parents who get divorced, or I my daughter's mother and I were never married. So there wasn't like a big court process. There wasn't legal all this stuff. We figured everything out. You know what I mean? Like my daughter
Yeah.
comes and goes. We live about 6 blocks from each other, sit by each other at school functions. Ex is in a blended family, or my daughter's in a blended family, with her fiance and his son. Our schedule, quote unquote, which is mostly generally outlined to his son's schedule. So when they have both kids next weekend, no kids, right? My daughter
Yep.
comes and goes, but she can't pit us against each other because she's no tablet there, no tablet here, no TV here, no TV there. You eat what we
Yep.
cook till tomorrow morning. I don't, you know what I mean? You're not going to out willpower me. Like, you don't run this and you don't run it there. so like, so we've been on the same page as far as that kind of stuff. But what does tend to happen with parents is one will take on the majority, or a huge overwhelming sense of guilt that the relationship had failed, or that their children are being brought up in separate homes, or you have religious, family, all these pressures that tell you if you get married, you stay married, stick it out no matter what, right? And so for the
Yep.
relationship to end, then you get one or both sides dealing with an immense amount of guilt. Guilt tends to make the it tends to make the parent sort of let the kid do whatever they want because they already feel guilty that they're in this situation. And so then these kids, oh, it's not their fault. Oh, my kid would never do that. Oh, it's not their fault. And then you get the parents making excuses for all of these behaviors that are going to escalate as they get older, right? So if you got a
Yep.
5-year-old girl that's in your class that feels like she can just slap the other kid no matter what, and you tell the parent at the end of the class, like, you separate the kids, tell her not to do it, she's in, don't do that, that's not acceptable behavior in my class, da 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 da. If you tell the parent what happened, oh, my daughter would never do that, or my son would never do that, and it's like, they're doing that. You know what I mean? Like, they need these boundaries that, just
Yeah.
like the routine you were talking about. If you don't set boundaries and guidelines for these kids, then when that kid is 15 years old and wants to just bully some other kid for whatever reason at school, to them it's acceptable behavior because they've never been in trouble for
Yeah.
it.
Wrapping up here, JP, what advice do you have for parents and co-parents on how to get on the same page when it comes to raising their kids?
My biggest advice would be to take your feelings out of the equation and put your kids first. Sort out your own shame, guilt, anger, animosity, whatever traumas, emotions, and that, yada, yada, yada. Once you can get out of your own way and collaborate with the other parent to set your children up to succeed, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you run into a lot of instances where one parent will sort of fight tooth and nail the other parent for every decision, sort of like, oh, it was your idea, so no, I'm not agreeing to that. You know what I mean? It's a bad idea, and it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with what's best for the kid. It has to do with your hurt pride, and maybe they had a good idea, and I'm not going to listen to it because you had the idea. You know what I mean? And so
Yep.
once you can get out of your own way and just get on the same page and put the kids first, it just is a lot easier. It runs a lot smoother. You know what I mean?
It's great advice, and it might take some sucking up your pride, but we have to
Right.
remember if we want to end bullying, it starts at home. It doesn't start anywhere else. It
Hmm.
starts at home. You can blame the schools all you want. It starts with you.
Right.
JP, thank you so much for coming on my podcast. If people want to get a hold of you or connect with you, where can they do that?
Instagram's usually the best place. It's just my name. You know, if you got certain specific questions, you know, you shoot me a message or
Is it
that kind
JP
of stuff.
Marsh?
Yeah,
And I will put your Instagram
perfect.
link on the show notes. Again, JP, thanks for coming on today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
And for myself, you can always find us at our very own website, which is www.breakingbullying.com. You can also reach out to us at our email address. If you have a story of your own bullying to share, or for whatever reason you want to get a hold of us, our email address is breakbullyinghere@gmail.com. Now, if you're a victim of bullying and you don't know where to turn, there is online resources to help you. The first is the government's very own anti-bullying website, and the address is www.stopbullying.gov. And other online resource is www.pacer.org/bullying. Now, if you have had thoughts of suicide or of self-harm, we implore you to stop. Reach out to the National Suicide Hotline. That number is very simple. It's 988. I'm Tim Flynn, and thank you for listening, and we will be back next week to continue the conversation to break the silence on bullying.